Hey everybody, today on the Gourmand, I'm going to be showing you guys how to make focaccia. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content. Let's get to it. Wow. All right, so for those of you who don't know what focaccia is, it's a very fluffy Italian bread. It's usually baked in a pan, packed full of flavor, lots of olive oil. It's an amazing, simple bread recipe. Again, very few ingredients. We have flour. I use fresh baker's yeast. We just need water and salt and olive oil, of course. Here, you're going to want to use a good quality olive oil because that's what's going to give the majority of the flavor to the focaccia. It's going to have a nice crispy bottom, and then basically we're just going to drench this thing in olive oil, and then we're going to top it. You could top it with whatever you want. Generally, it's flaky sea salt, rosemary, thyme, some herbs. You could put potatoes. You could put basil and tomato. You could put sausage. You could put pretty much anything you want. So when it comes to actually making the focaccia itself, I use bread flour. This is 500 grams of bread flour. It just has a little more gluten structure to it compared to all-purpose flour, so I prefer to use bread flour when it comes to making bread. So here we have our bread flour. I'm going to take my 25 grams of baker's yeast or fresh yeast. I'm going to mix it into, I have here 325 milliliters of warm water. So I'm just going to dissolve it in here. Doesn't need to be completely dissolved, just a majority of it. It was a little humid, and the yeast kind of took on this weird toothpaste texture. Usually it's a little crummy, but it doesn't matter. It'll do the job. If you can, use fresh yeast. I really suggest for everyone to use fresh yeast. For me, I prefer it. Like I said, you get that lovely yeast flavor, and if it's good enough for bakeries, it's good enough for you in your own home. So I'm going to take this now. I'm going to go in with my yeast. Of course, it gets stuck. There we go. We're going to start to incorporate this. Once again, if you want, you can use a mixer. Use your hands. If you use a mixer, be sure to use the dough hook attachment. I'm going to use my hands just because that's how I've always made bread. So we're going to come in. I'm going to start mixing it slowly. Now, until you start getting all the flour incorporated, it's going to be really, really, really sticky. That's completely normal. So start kneading in here. And again, when you're kneading in a bowl, over and in, over and in. Now, so here we are. It's a little crummy, doesn't look the nicest. We still have a bunch of flour left at the bottom. I'm going to go in with a little bit of olive oil right now. I say that's like 3 tablespoons. So you see right away, the dough started changing color. Became softer, velvety. I'm going to scoop all this up. Move to our work table. So we're going to knead this out. And once you start kneading like this, once you really start kneading, the dough is going to get wet again. So it's very important to have your flour here. Flour your work table. Flour your dough. And we don't want to use too much flour. We don't want this to be completely dry. We're going to need this for about 5 minutes until the dough becomes nice and uniform. We get rid of all those big lumps. Again, look, when we're kneading, we go out, pull in, out, pull in, and we want to rotate it. I keep on rotating that dough and keep on kneading it. Now, when I'm almost done kneading, this is when I'll incorporate the salt. You're never supposed to incorporate the salt with your yeast. The salt will kill the yeast. There's no point of getting fresh yeast in that case, because you're not gonna get the rise you want. So I come in here with a couple pinches of salt on this side, push that in, flip it over. Maybe that's about 2 tablespoons of salt. We're gonna push that in. We're gonna start kneading again. So you see, I'm always keeping it as a ball. Want to push out, push out. Look at the wrist. This hand, I'm using it as a guide. With this hand, I'm pushing out, pulling in with my fingertips. And then it's creating a fold on that side. So if you look at it from the side, pushing out, pulling in, creating a fold. And then I'm pushing all that together. And then I'm rotating again. We're getting a little wet here. Now, when it comes to kneading, there's no real specific time. You know, most recipes say knead for about 8 to 10 minutes. Could be 5. Baking is a very particular art form. They always say baking is a science, but for those of you that have ethnic grandmothers that make bread at home, most of you have probably realized that they don't use recipes, because they know when their dough is ready. And this is something that takes time to do. And it all takes into account the humidity of the air, the dryness, type of water you're using, type of flour you're using, where you are in the world. There we go. So this is smooth to the touch. It looks a little craggy. It's smooth to the touch. It's going to get a lot smoother once we let it rest. You can already feel the heat. The yeast is doing its job. You can feel your dough ball should be a little warm. That's why I like to use a little bit. My water is generally a little bit warmer than room temperature. Just gives a little kickstart to the yeast. So we're going to take a clean bowl, add a little bit of oil to the bottom and around. You just put that in with your hands. Add a little more. Oil is your friend in this recipe. You want the dough to really take on as much oil as it can. We're going to put the dough ball bottom down into the oil, drizzle some on top. We're going to cover this with a damp rag. You can cover with plastic, anything you want. I'm going to use a damp rag. I'm just going to cover it like this. Make sure the bowl is nice and covered. Leave it aside somewhere warm, preferably. We're going to leave this to proof for about 45 minutes or until at least doubled in size. So we'll come back and check on you guys in 45 minutes. All right, everyone. So we're back after 45 minutes after our first proof. So here you can see it's pretty much doubled in size, nice and soft. It's warm. That's what we want. The yeast is doing its job. So now I have a baking sheet here. We're going to put a lot of olive oil. And when I mean a lot, I mean like uncomfortable amounts of olive oil. We're just gonna spread this around. Make sure to get it on all the corners. This one is gonna ensure that our focaccia isn't gonna stick on the pan. And two, remember, we want the focaccia to absorb all this lovely oil. So we're gonna turn this out. Sometimes you might get a little bit of sticking. That's normal. As long as you're gentle with it, it should come just right out and leave you a clean bowl. So then we're gonna press this out as much as we can. Now, don't forget, this is dough. It's gonna wanna come back. So see, I'm pushing the dough and it wants to come back right away. But the more we work it, that's good enough for now. This is also going to go through a second proof. We're going to leave this proof again for another 45 minutes. So the dough is going to have time to relax. Again, it's going to increase in size. It's going to get nice and fluffy. And notice how when I was pressing the focaccia in, I'm using my fingertips. I'm presetting those nice little lovely pockets where you see here, that's what we want. When you're going to make focaccia, we're going to see that it's gonna proof and it's gonna double in size, that we want all these lovely holes. That I'm not attacking it. I'm not going into this. I'm not breaking it. I'm just pressing down, trying to get this to go to the corners. So here, once my focaccia has gone to all four corners and is pretty much even, this is where you're going to want to add your herbs. It's very important, since your hands are already oily, that you massage your herbs a little bit with the oil, because if you were to put just dry herbs in the focaccia, they would burn. It's always important that you have some sort of cooking medium. So that's what the oil is for. So here we're going to go with a little bit of thyme. Think of thyme as little trees. I see people sometimes they just go and they cut the thyme and it'll go right onto the dishes. This is it's like a little piece of wood. No one really wants to end up with that in their mouth. Then we're going to come with the rosemary. Rosemary is a little bit easier. So rosemary here, once you get the first little bit of rosemary off, again, rosemary too, it's like a big piece of wood. You just grab it from the top. You're going to slide your fingers down and it should all come off the stem. We're just going to sprinkle these on the focaccia as well. No one ever said that this was going to be an exciting recipe. It's definitely something that's kind of boring to make. There's lots of waiting. The majority of the time you're waiting. Aside from the kneading, you leave it rest for 45 minutes, take it out, you do this step. We're going to leave this rest now for another 45 minutes. And then we're going to bake it. And then have to wait for it to bake. Then we have to leave it rest. But it's all going to be worth it at the end. The flavor that you're going to get from the focaccia, that crispiness, the richness from the olive oil is truly something else. So I'm just going to cover this again with the same damp little kitchen towel that I used before. And we're going to set this aside. Leave it to rest. We'll come back in 45 minutes. All right, everyone, so here we are after our second and final proof. As I'm sure you can probably see behind me, it's gotten a little darker. We don't have no swap outs here. I don't got the budget for that. So this has been resting twice. It's proofed twice for 45 minutes. And that's exactly what we wanted. Nice little fluffy pockets. The oil has actually come up through the bottom of the focaccia. So here we're not exactly all the way up to the corners. I'm just going to gently move the focaccia over. Now it's nice and rested, so it should move nice and easy. So we're just gonna move this there. And you know what? We're gonna give it one final drizzle around the edges. Just like that. Hey, you know what? Who cares? Go over like that. This isn't something you should eat every day. Once in a while. Focaccia goes nice with dinner. We're gonna use coarse salt to put over the top. And this is going to go into a 450 degree oven. I have mine on regular bake. We're gonna put it on the before last rack on the bottom. So we want the bottom's gonna get nice and crispy, well done. It's okay if it gets even a little toasted, I'm not gonna say burnt, but you know, nice and toasted and crisp, nice and brown on the bottom. Then the edges are gonna be the best part. You're gonna see once we take this out, they're gonna be full of the olive oil, nice and greasy, toasty, beautiful golden brown color. So as I mentioned, we're gonna put this in 450 degree oven. I'm gonna say, because everyone's ovens are a little different, anywhere between 15 and 20 minutes. That's usually the sweet spot there, but keep an eye on it. It could be a little less, it could be a little more. Right in there. We'll come back in about 15 minutes and then focaccia should be nice and done. Okay, so here we are, everyone. It's been 17 minutes-ish. I'm very scientific when it comes to cooking, 17 minutes-ish. So I'm gonna turn this off. I don't want to get a face full of wind. Oh yeah. So there we go. See all the nice little pockets of olive oil, nice and crispy. Hear that hollow sound? That means that your bread is full of air. We did what we were supposed to. Comes off of the bottom, nice and easy. Before you cut into this, you have to leave it rest. It's very important because if you cut into this now, all your hard work is gonna go to waste. You're just gonna cut into it, it's gonna deflate, and then there's really no point of all that waiting that you just did. You guys ready? It's like cutting through air. It's as if the middle didn't exist. See how nice and fluffy that is? It's moist, not dry at all. Top is nice and crispy. Bottom is, you have all these nice little oily pockets. I really can't say any more. You guys are just gonna have to try it for yourself. Thanks for watching. Again, be sure to like our video, subscribe, and again, feel free to leave any suggestion in the comment section below. I hope everybody gives this focaccia recipe a try. Until next time,